भारत एक इंक्लूसिव और फ्लेक्सिबल इंडो पैसिफिक इकोनॉमिक फ्रेमवर्क के निर्माण के लिए आप सभी के साथ काम करेगा। मेरा मानना है कि हमारे बीच रेजिलियंट सप्लाई चेन्स के 3 मुख्य आधार होने चाहिए: ट्रस्ट, ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड टाइमलीनेस। मुझे विश्वास है कि यह फ्रेमवर्क इन तीनों स्तंभों को मजबूत करने में सहायक होगा।
While addressing delegates at the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework or IPEF, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that the pact will pave the way for development, peace and prosperity in the region. While joining the bloc floated by US President Joe Biden, India made its intentions very clear. Peace in the region was the foremost priority for it, without which business and prosperity was not possible. IPEF is a critical part of US President Biden's plan to counter China's growing influence in the Asian economic sphere. Biden plans to do so by partnering with other countries, which are India, Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. The IPEF has 4 pillars. The first is supply chain resilience. The second involves clean energy, decarbonization, and infrastructure. The third deals with taxation and anti-corruption. And the fourth one is fair and resilient trade. The US is also seeking to include digital economy issues like the cross-border flows and localization of data. So, what will be the shape of the pact? According to a February report by the US Congressional Research Service, US officials have stated that they do not envision the IPEF taking the form of a traditional trade agreement. The report cited a USTR official saying in February that the initiative would include different modules covering fair and resilient trade, supply chain resilience, infrastructure and decarbonization, and tax and anti-corruption. Basically, the pillars we spoke of before. Countries will have to sign up to all of the components within a module, but will not have to participate in all modules. In particular, the Fair and Resilient Trade module will be led by USTR and include digital, labor, and environment issues with some binding commitments. As reported by Business Standard, the IPEF joint statement does not call for launching negotiations for a trade pact. Instead, it only promises to begin collective discussions towards future negotiations. Without ruling out tariff negotiations under the proposed trade pact, the joint statement said that cooperation in the digital economy would be part of the efforts under IPEF. A White House fact sheet spoke of pursuing high-standard digital economy rules with regard to cross-border data flows and data localization, along with seeking strong labor and environment standards and corporate accountability provisions. And it is in these details that the devil lies. As explained previously by Business Standard, India and the US have contrasting views on digital commerce, labor, and environmental standards. In fact, India strongly resists putting such standards in any of the free trade agreements it enters into.
IPEF basically intends to bring about this kind of regulatory coherence that you just mentioned. It's very similar to what was happening in TPP. And by regulatory coherence, I really mean the whole systems of regulations that are at the heart of determining market access into their countries. So there are a whole lot of issues that are there, including digital economy, e-commerce, environmental standards, labor standards. So, for instance, the digital economy, and then the digital economy, the key issue that is important for us is this whole issue of data portability. Now, the data portability issue has not been addressed in this country effectively, because there was this bill which is now moving in the parliament, or it's somewhere. But the short point is that we haven't actually agreed yet decided or agreed on the framework to decide whether or not we would agree to data portability. The second issue is on e-commerce. Now, in e-commerce, rules are being framed in the WTO, and India is not participating in the negotiations. We are outside the room. We are not negotiating that. And finally, on labor standards, now labor standards, there have been demands from our industry to, to make the standards or the whole regulation more flexible. So we want a flexibility in the labor market. So our labor standards have become weaker, if anything. So in all these issues, India, will have to address very different set of standards being a part of IPEF. The second issue, of course, is that our institutions don't have really the depth to address these issues. So both in terms of the nature of the standards and the institutions that are there to implement them and to carry them forward, India would actually face some problems. All the other countries have certain amount of preparedness because they were, as a part, they were either part of the TPP or, they knew that they would have to implement it as a member of the TPP. India is an outlier. We really have to see what kind of sensitivity other members, particularly the US, shows in terms of the concerns that India would have going forward. And then we have to see where India stands vis-a-vis IPEF.
The nature of the framework itself could be a cause for concern. According to a brief written by the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, the Biden administration has domestically portrayed the IPEF as an initiative that will enable the US to better compete with China in the region. Due to this, some of the Indo-Pacific partners had been apprehensive that instead of being a sincere and thoughtful economic program, the IPEF was primarily a political endeavor meant to counter China. The same CSIS brief also described India as possibly not being an ideal IPEF participant under current conditions, although it did say that India's exclusion from the IPEF would raise questions about how the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework truly is. While IPEF's success or failure is far ahead in the future, it is clear that at present, it poses a particularly tough challenge for India.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.